Welcome and good afternoon from the Kitchen Club in Madrid. You might have seen and also noticed, following the short delay and technical problems, that we have changed the settings. So those who have already followed us from this morning, we're now in the Kitchen Club in Madrid because we have prepared a very special part of the program. Talks on innovation, startups combined with a cooking show, as you can see here on the left side. Innovation is key to economic success, with investments in research and development being the backbone for progress. But what is a good recipe for a powerful business ecosystem in the digital age? What can we learn from each other in Europe, in Israel? What do innovation and startups, as well as cooking, have in common? In order to answer these and other questions, I'm pleased to welcome our experts from Israel online and Europe, from the two different industries that closely connected to innovation, from the automotive sector and the Fintech sector. Namely, to my right, Nicolas Salguero from Arbor Fintech here in Madrid, and online, as you can see, hopefully on the screen, Hemdat Sagi from the Volkswagen Group in Tel Aviv. Missing in the panel is David Hanneberger, the head of office of the Naumann Foundation in Madrid. My name is Carmen Decon, and to my side, there is also David Estebaranz, our cook, will show us later on some culinary specialities from the Israeli cooking scene. So I'm very glad to have you here with us. Before we dive deeper into the topic, just two short sentences about the Naumann Foundation and the activities in Israel. The Naumann Foundation is active in Jerusalem since 1983 already, and they work for the promotion of democracy and liberal principles. Advancement of Israeli-Palestinian dialogue is part of the core work of the foundation there, and I'm very proud to announce that the program, very special dialogue program, ME 2.0 Palestinian Israeli Young Business Leaders Forum, celebrated its 70th actually session last Sunday, because they were established 10 years ago, which also leads me to our first speaker, to Hemdat Sagi, because she is currently a member of this business forum. So welcome again, Hemdat. I hope you can hear us, and I'm really excited for your talk. You're an expert in open innovation and disruptive technologies. You're currently the head of strategy and business development at Konnect, which is the Volkswagen Group's innovation hub in Tel Aviv. You yourself set up this innovation hub actually in 2017, but before, you've already been very active in the field of innovation, being a consultant for Audi, or also as the head of economic development at the Israeli embassy in Berlin. So without further ado, I would like to give you the floor, Hemdat, with the very complex question: what makes Israel a startup nation? Here you go.
Thank you, Carmen. So first of all, it's great to be here. Thank you for this invitation. Also, I want to thank the forum in Israel, Anna, who's leading it, and the other colleagues in Jerusalem. It's a great pleasure for me, even though I'm not there with you. I'm at home. So I hope I can feel and imagine the smells that are coming out of the kitchen there. And it's a great question to start with, since a lot of people ask, what is the special sauce? What is the special recipe that makes Israel a startup nation? So I would like to focus on the main elements of Israel. Israel is known as the Silicon Valley. It's a small country with 9 million citizens. However, it has the highest number of startups per capita in the world. And as it was mentioned before, Israel spends 4.5% of its GDP on R&D expenditure, which makes it number one out of all the OECD countries. So what makes Israel so special? I would say it's a number of attributes. First of all, Israel is a small country. There's basically no choice but to expand. So Israelis, when they open a company, a startup, they think from day one how to be international, how to basically solve a global challenge which can be scaled and not stay in this very small market, because simply there is no small market. So every startup really wants to go global, to go to Europe, to go to the US. So that's that understanding that the market is not here in Israel. The second element is, I would say, a very heavy government support. Since Israel became an open economy, privatized, it realized that it had to attract investors to Israel. And because Israel doesn't have any natural resources, it relies only on the high tech and basically on the human capital. Therefore, the government of Israel said, I need to invest in this, I need to support startups, and I will establish an arm, which is called the innovation arm, and will give funds to companies who need that money. So basically, this innovation fund, innovation authority that acts already for 40 years, is a very unique model. If you have an idea, you can come to this innovation authority and get funded for basically up to 1 million shekel, even or more, to your idea. And the government says, if you fail, then this is a grant. You don't need to pay us back. But if you succeed, you would need to pay us royalties for the success of your startup, but up to 7 years. So it's very convenient. So the government says, I want to support the ecosystem, the companies. I will support them in funds. I will attract investors, foreign investors, by giving them many incentives to establish R&D centers in Israel. And this is why we see in Israel 360 research and development centers of multinational companies such as Google, such as Facebook, Apple, and also Volkswagen Group, which I represent. So the government plays a very major role in pushing the innovation and pushing the entrepreneurs. A third element I want to focus on is actually the army service. It's pretty surprising, but the army has become a place where a lot of young people gain knowledge that have to do with cyber or intelligence technologies. And when they come out of those special intelligence units, they have the ability and the skill to establish a company in similar fields, only adapted to the private market. Not only that, also the army is, I would say, a place to find and network in the future. The fourth element is the culture. So Israelis are known to have this chutzpah. Chutzpah in Yiddish means being rude or daring to do things. And Israel is known, Israelis are known to not be polite so much. And therefore, a lot of startups need that element. They need to basically keep insisting, keep convincing that they have the best startup. And that element is very important. It's not only that, it's a culture that respects failure. So if you fail with your first startup, it's okay. You're actually not going to be disregarded. You will be highly valued that you tried, and you probably learned from that lesson. So many entrepreneurs in the market are serial entrepreneurs. They failed with some startups, but they rose up again and learned from that experience. So the chutzpah, the second chance, or a failure culture, I believe, is what differentiates Israel from others. Then there's other elements which exist in other countries, which is strong academy and a strong transfer of ideas from the academy to the high-tech world. But I believe the elements, the first elements that I mentioned, which is Israel being an island market, B, the army element, which produces and yields technologies in the intelligence, cyber, or IT technologies. Also, young people with management skills. The third is as I said, the army service. The third I said is the government support, and the fourth is the culture, the chutzpah, the thinking out of the box and taking risks.
Thank you very much, Hemdat.
Yeah, with pleasure.
That gave us a lot of yes, food for thought actually, and I learned also something about like character traits of Israeli, which I wouldn't have guessed actually. And we were also smiling here in the studio because yes, the fact of being perseverant that you highlighted actually was very interesting. But before heading over to Nicholas Salguero, who is actually a founder of a fintech startup, who could maybe also tell us more about success and failure stories, I would like us to taste the first dish that has been prepared to my left. David, are you ready?
Yes,
what are you
course.
going to serve us?
We're going to serve first the citrus salad. So if you want to
I think I can't touch it. So I can already start describing what I have in front of me. It's a delicious citrus salad with some cucumber, I think.
Cucumber, yes, pomegranate, orange, some lemon as well. So be careful if you don't like the acid one. And kind of a raita, which is a yogurt sauce we made with honey and blue cheese. So I hope you enjoy.
Thank you very much.
Enjoy.
I will only take a short bit because our aim is also to discuss further on innovation. If you have followed us through the day, you might recall that we already had a cooking session around midday with the food blogger No Garlic No Onion, and actually what he said about successful Mediterranean cuisine, we can also see it here in the studio, because around lunchtime he said Mediterranean cuisine is all about passion, happy people, and vegetables. So you see vegetables here. In order to set up a startup, you need passion, and I think this is also a perfect transition for Nicholas and your startup Arbor. So Nicholas, I'm very happy to have you with. Are you ready?
I'm
More
ready.
or less,
I'm
yes.
ready to rock and roll.
I'm happy to have you here with us. You're CEO and co-founder of Arbor Fintech, which is a financial wellness app based in Madrid. And you also went through the Google Accelerator with that startup. So what did you motivate you actually to set up this startup? And in your eyes, how can we create favorable conditions for startups to settle and flourish?
Definitely a very interesting question. Thank you, Carmen. So yes, I am the founder of Arbor. I actually have two other co-founders, and we started the business about 3.5 years ago. So for us, it was very important to select a good base, right? And so where we wanted to be, how we wanted to do this, and obviously who we were going to bring along for the ride and what our target market was going to be. So for us, it was very important to select that market right. I actually moved from the US here to Europe. Our base is in Madrid, Spain, as you've pointed out. And I mean, for us, there was a huge point around an important access to talent, right? It was all about knowing who could join this, who could be with us, and having that access to talent, which is a huge thing for us. If you were to start up a similar company anywhere else in the world, it would probably be quite difficult or much more expensive. For example, if you were to do it in the States or perhaps in the UK. So for us, it just made all the sense in the world to do here in Spain. And in addition to that, there was a huge opportunity in the market. I mean, there was a very, very niche opportunity within what we're doing. It's a completely underserved market. As you well said, we're a financial wellness app, basically. And what that means in essence is that we help people, or our purpose is to improve people's financial wellness. We help them save completely automatically, basically on autopilot. We help them invest, and we help them basically get out of debt or basically manage their debt. And so this is really what we do. And yeah, I'll be happy to go into some more detail further on with kind of how the ecosystem has helped us out and kind of what the challenges and what some of those successes and failures have been.
Indeed. Thank you very much for that as well. I would quickly like to hand over to David as well, representative of the foundation here in our distinguished panel. So David, looking at the bigger picture, what interest is there to take a closer look at the topic of innovation from the point of view of a political foundation?
Well, this very morning we were talking about the idea of having this entire day of online streaming, which is something new for a German political foundation here in Madrid. And this is also about innovation. We have to adapt to a changing environment, which is now the post-COVID-19 world, or we are still in the first wave actually. And the same applies for entire economies. So from a political point of view, if we want to safeguard and even improve our living standard, and not just in our home countries, but also in other parts of the world, this is why we work abroad, we have to focus on innovation and startups. And in many countries, in the developing world especially, new enterprises are the only chance to lift huge young generations where the demographics are very different from Europe or the US, for instance, out of poverty. So if we only focus on established economy, enterprises and companies, we will never be able to do that. So we have to really to create cultures of innovations, of startup, of failure, as we've heard. And this is really, really important, I think. Also, but this is connected to it also in developed places like Israel or Europe. It is very much connected to equal opportunities for all, I think. We cannot just focus on access to capital and so on. We have to go and look at education programs, for instance, in schools. It's not just fair if only people or kids from rich parents get an idea of what entrepreneurship is and how they can manage their networks and their access to capital and whatever. We have to really get into that as well and create the spirit of entrepreneurship as early as in school.
That's a very good incentive. And I would like to step in here because in Israel, as well as in Europe or Madrid, there are startup accelerators or incubators. Maybe Hemdat, you could tell us a little bit more about what is called Silicon Valley. Mm-hmm. What is that?
Silicon Valley is, I would say, a name that represents Israel. It's not the Silicon Valley, of course. So in terms of numbers, it's Israel has 6,000 startups. As I said, it has the highest number of startups per capita. And the main topics in the ecosystem here in Israel are computer vision, AI, machine learning, cybersecurity, which I mentioned before. Healthcare is digital healthcare is a major topic as well. Of course, I think a lot of the topics around that will accelerate because of COVID. Yeah, that's basically the Silicon Valley. As I said before, there's many international hubs here in Israel. They don't consider Israel as I would say a market because it's so small. They don't manufacture here usually, but they do establish hubs of R&D centers or innovation arms just like ours, and therefore create an ecosystem where startups and international and multinational companies are close to one another and can learn the needs of one another. Most of the startups are based in Tel Aviv and the area. I would say more than 50% out of those 6,000 that I mentioned. Others are located in the south and in the north, but mostly around the center of Israel. And the high tech is the big, I would say, engine that boosts the Israeli economy. I hope I answered your question about it.
Yes, you did actually more in depth than what I expected. And we can also do the transfer to Madrid because we have, well, not as big as Silicon Valley, but there is also another kind of valley here in Madrid. Nicholas.
For sure. It's actually called Tetuan Valley, which is actually not too far away from here. So we were actually very fortunate to go through one of these programs ourselves. We've been through a few, to be very honest with you. And it's been instrumental for us to actually, come as newcomers, both to the industry as well to the ecosystem, and be able to access kind of the help you need when you're starting out. And I guess there's really a clear difference between what an incubator is and what an accelerator is. I mean, we have both of these. We've been through both, and at the end of the day, it was a great help for us getting into this new market basically, and just starting out in something basically from scratch. In our industry specifically, basically, outside of innovation and startups in general, Fintech for Spain is a huge thing. Obviously, there's a big branch of Fintech here in Spain. Obviously, we're a very, I'd say, bank-oriented economy as well. We have some really large and very good banks here in Spain. So obviously, that's a big part of it. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how that evolves over the next years. And we've been very fortunate to be able to kind of ride that wave and go through these programs and have access to the help that they give.
Good. I see actually, David, are you ready? There is a second plate being prepared.
Yes, of course, we're ready.
Are we ready for the second one?
If you are ready, I'm ready.
We've been speaking of startup accelerators. As we have had some technical problems in the beginning, we have to accelerate as well a little bit with the program, but this is no problem. So we won't throw away all the delicious dishes, but we'll just give you a small appetizer and we'll finish them once recording is over, just to assure you. So we're ready for the next dish.
Ready for the next.
And in the meantime, I can already invite our online audience. I get a sign from the technical team. I can invite the online audience to ask your questions to Hemdat, to Nicholas, to David concerning innovation startups. Ask questions on Facebook, on YouTube. And the first question is coming in right now. Well, now we have some problems reconnecting to the other studio. But we have some advertisers here.
Hello?
Yes, I see Natalia. Hello,
Hi.
Natalia.
Hi, Carmen. How are you? You hear me, you see me, right?
Yes.
Great.
Double yes.
Yes, so I have 3 questions from the audience, which I'm going to tell you now, and you decide who should answer these questions, okay? First one, it's Sebastián Romero from Spain, who's asking, what are the major startup hubs in Europe and Israel?
This is a question for Hemdat and Nicholas.
You go first, Hemdat. All yours.
What are the major startup hubs? That's the question?
Sorry, yeah, the question
major
is
startup hubs in Israel.
So in terms of location, so as I said, Tel Aviv, Herzliya, the center of Israel, that's where you can find about 3,500 startups. Then you can find hubs around Jerusalem, Haifa, and the south in Beersheba. Those are the locations. Israel is a very small country, so you can cross it in one day in 7-hour drive. So it doesn't mean a lot, I have to say. It's not like the US when you actually separate between the East Coast and the West Coast. It's very small. Eventually, it doesn't really matter. And especially when people now move to virtual, I think distances are even becoming smaller.
Luckily for us, because you're with us.
Yeah, so when we're speaking of Europe, so obviously, Sebastian, being in Spain, for sure, Madrid and Barcelona are big startup hubs for us here in Spain. There's also a pretty interesting ecosystem in Valencia, which is a really cool ecosystem, to be honest. It is, I'd say it is slightly fintech focused, although there is a bit of everything, so that's obviously interesting. And then outside of Spain, I mean, major cities in general have good ecosystems around them. And in many places, you have kind of the corporate fostering of those ecosystems through these, innovative incubators and accelerators. So I guess I'd highlight obviously London, Paris, definitely in Germany, Munich. There's actually a decent startup hub, and many others. I mean, Berlin for sure as well. So I mean, there's a bit everywhere. It's interesting to see how obviously there's a good bit in each country, and obviously each of them have kind of their specialty, if you will.
Indeed. Question to my technical team, to Natalia. Are there other questions coming in? Otherwise, I still have plenty of them.
Yes,
Natalia.
actually, I have a couple more. So next question would be from Laura from Spain as well. And the question is, how did Israeli and European businesses turn the global COVID-19 pandemic into opportunities?
Good question. Shall I start?
It's open, so.
It was a really interesting time here. First of all, a lot of my colleagues, a lot of startups, of course, moved to working virtually. We are a hub of a major company that is based in Germany. So our team, which usually travels, basically stayed at home. And I have to say that we found great opportunities. First, people had more time, more attention to us. And I think people became more productive. We were able to focus on strategic topics, which we usually, put aside because we were so busy in, the day-to-day. We finished to update our website, basically think about our new strategic topics, think about how to create more partnerships in the market and find more internal stakeholders. It was a very positive time for us as a team. And I hear the same messages from other startups and companies, which are lucky enough to work in a virtual way. Of course, I'm not speaking about the huge numbers of people who lost their jobs in Israel and are suffering right now without an ability to open their businesses, like restaurants and hotels. That's for me personally, it's very sad, and I think we should really think about how to support them. But coming back to the point, some startups also have pivoted, meaning changed their business model. For example, there's a startup by the name of Nanoscent. Their usual technology is to detect smells in a factory, suspicious smells, or and basically tell you if your factory is if there's CO2 in the air and things like that. They realize they can detect Corona smell or COVID smell. Not yet, they're still in development. So they sort of now change their business model into identifying and detecting by smell if someone has Corona symptoms. So that's an example. And I've heard about other startups that actually thought, how can we change our business to basically support the current needs? A factory would need to identify their employer's health remotely. People will need to work in a more sterile environment. There's so many new use cases. Let's think about the car. The car needs to be much more, let's say, hygienic, right? So a lot of startups in Israel thought, how can we use our usual technology, for example, to clear the air inside the car's inside cabin, and if they usually would take care of, as I said, other smells in the cabin or something like that, now they can detect maybe if there's signs of sickness, for example, or materials that can clean themselves in the car, therefore making the car antibacteria, antivirus. So I think that's super innovative. And I'd like to see that. And I'm sure this time will accelerate so many more ideas as well.
Indeed, turning challenges into opportunities. Nicholas, do you have some, in a nutshell, some success stories as well?
Yeah.
How did Arbor adapt?
So obviously very consistent with what we're seeing elsewhere in the world, and obviously very cognizant of the realities and difficulties many people are facing. I mean, we went fully remote before everything hit, and to be honest with you, we found a lot of opportunities to make certain things that we have better. We've actually found a few opportunities to take an innovative approach to common problems we already have within our user base, right? Like different uses of our technology. We've had a lot of interaction with the corporates, which are looking for those solutions for digital onboardings, different things along these lines, automation, et cetera, within obviously financial services. So I think that there's definitely opportunities out there. It's all about kind of getting people rallied behind this is the new reality, we need to adapt. And obviously, we're at the forefront of innovation. If we don't do it, nobody will, right? And so that's been really how we focused on it, and we've seen other companies also flourish, obviously, within this difficult setting.
Indeed, thank you very much. A quick question to Andres, back to the technical team. Do we still have time? Because normally our time would have been over, but I at least want to show you those delicious dishes. There is some baba ganoush on my left side with some pomegranate and some aubergines. Do we have time? Well, I don't have any information, so we will just go on. As we have the extreme opportunity to have both Israeli and European experts, I would like to know from both of you, okay, here you see the dishes. I would like to know from the speakers, which potential do you see for joint EU-Israeli innovation forces when it comes either to public cooperation, public spending programs, or also in the private sector? How could we better work together?
That's a really good question. And obviously there's a huge opportunity behind doing that and doing it effectively. I mean, one of the huge hurdles that we see in our industry is obviously the regulatory framework around it, right? And so when we look at the EU, we have something called passporting, through which we can actually access the entire EU market and basically give our services or sell our products, sell our services anywhere in the EU. This isn't something we could do with Israel. So it would be great to see some sort of sandbox entity or framework in the regulatory aspect where we would be able to basically, test pilot our technology and sell our services to, for example, Israelis. So that would be a great way to do it, obviously.
And handing over to Israel, Hemdat, you've been working in Berlin as well, so maybe you could also take on a joint European-Israeli view.
Yeah, I spent some years in Berlin, and basically I was working in exactly your goal to promote collaborations between Israeli companies and German corporates, Mittelstand, SMEs, and so on and so forth. I've seen, and I still do in my current role, so many complementaries, and I'm super passionate to continue pushing that. And I'll just give a few examples coming from my work. So I'm heading the strategy and innovation at the Volkswagen Group Innovation Hub. What we do, we look for startups in Israel that can provide solutions for us when it comes to autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles, anything about shared and connected mobility. And since our group, as well as many European entities, realized that in order to stay competitive, there must be collaborations with startup. There must be open innovation, not just internal R&D, not just keep all the projects, let's say, within your own team, because there's a lot of great startups and it's smarter to collaborate with them. Therefore, we established a hub in Tel Aviv, and what we're doing is we're doing POCs, pilots. We invite the startups to try their technologies in our vehicles, in our software, in our factories. And if this POC or pilot is successful, then we continue to a longer commercial agreement. And I think that's exactly it, bringing the need from the European side and matching it to an idea, a startup or a technology in Israel. And it would certainly not be a competition because Israelis would never be able to compete with it. I'm talking about the huge European corporates, or it's just complementary. So that's my advice, to work together in the sort of solving the challenges that each side has.
That is a good word to, well, to head over also to David, because you spoke about matching. Actually, the foundation is also already active in that field. Maybe you could tell us more about it worldwide.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, the entire topic of startups and innovation is, for the reasons that I've mentioned before, is important to liberals and also to German Liberal Foundation. So we have this innovation hub in Hong Kong, for instance, which is focusing a lot on startups and innovation, which is also transferring technology, new ideas for our own work to Germany and other offices in the world. I was based in Mexico City before I moved to Spain, being responsible for our work in Central America. So we founded the Innovate Entrepreneurship Summit in Guatemala, which is today the biggest startup summit in Central America. Also for the reasons that I've mentioned before, to give young people an opportunity to learn, be inspired, and do their own thing, basically. And the same is true for many other regions where we work, in Africa, in Latin America, Eastern Europe. I think it's also, from a liberal perspective, fostering eye-level dialogue. It's a great way to highlight others' perspectives, other sides of countries that we often perceive negatively in Western media or in European media because of, I don't know, high crime rates, or you name it. There is another side to the story. There are young people, innovative people all around the world who want to do their own thing and make the world a better place and also earn some money, and that's fair enough. and we are happy to support that. And as I said, I mean, it's also really important if you want to provide the health crisis that we are facing now all over the world. If you want to have strong healthcare systems, you need to have a sound economy. I mean, this is also what the discussion is now about. It's all interconnected. If we don't make our economies future-proof, it is hard to prepare for the next health crisis, public health crisis. So it's all interconnected. And so we work on startups and innovation a lot. And I'm really happy, to continue that work also with our colleague from the region and from Israel and here in Madrid.
So crossing borders, I think this is an element which resumes the story of the three of us, but also for Hemdat very well, fostering cooperation, fostering dialogue, trying new ways, new perspectives. Also when it comes to food, for example, you will see that we have just been served the next meal, which is, David, could you help us out?
Yes, it's a babaganoush, which is a kind of type of hummus, eggplant aubergine hummus.
Hemdat is nodding.
And we put it on the top some pomegranate, a little bit of crunchy aubergine, and some oil of fennel and coriander oil. Hope you enjoy.
Yeah, it's also good.
Yeah, it looks excellent. Thank you.
So as I said, lots of vegetables, lots of passion as well. And actually, speaking of numbers, I wanted to provide you with some interesting numbers that I found. For example, you can continue tasting. In 2018, the average time to set up a startup in the EU was 3.1 days, and it costed 300 euros. Maybe, Hemdat, you have figures for Israel. I will just do the comparison for 2007. So 11 years before, the average time was 12 days, so 4 times more, and the cost was 485 euros. So you see that there have been some improvements. For example, the European Commission has also launched some some programs to lower the burdens for startup being set up, but the regional disparities still prevail in the EU. For example, according to the Startup Progress Report in 2018, only 10 out of 28 EU member states accomplished the 3 objectives set by the European Commission for administrative simplification for startups. So these 3 objectives were providing a one-stop shop and a reduction in time and costs for setting a startup. You might be surprised, or not maybe, I was surprised personally to read that Germany did not fulfill any of those 3 conditions. So Germany is, well, at the very end of that list. Hemdat, question for you actually. Do you know by any coincidence how many days it takes to set up a startup in Israel, in the startup nation?
Well, actually, I'm not so sure about the current number, but I don't think it's that easier, to be honest. Many startups actually still complain about the bureaucracy, and I have to say that in a way, the high tech and the startup industry in Israel is a bubble. And it's not a big ecosystem, although it contributes a lot to the Israeli GDP and so on. But not a lot of people enjoy it if we're talking about, you know, societal topics. There's many societies in Israel that actually don't enjoy that prosperity. And if we're talking even about, I'm dealing with mobility and transportation and the future of mobility, but Israel is in fact very much behind when it comes to accessible transportation in places which are, you know, villages or distant areas. There's no, you know, just up until recently, there was no train that connected Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. So I have to be critical here and say that, again, the startup ecosystem is very flourishing, but this I think the government does give it some try to include other societies by engaging them, by providing professional learnings for societies like Arab societies and also ultra-Orthodox societies. But obviously they're not enjoying the same wealth. And that's just the point I wanted to make here. And that's why, for example, when we're having meetings of the Stiftung in Israel and the forum, it's very, I would say, important to have these dialogues. Just a few months ago, when it was still possible, we hosted in our hub the forum of the Naumann Stiftung in our hub in Tel Aviv, and we had guests from East Jerusalem, and I think it was very nice, and I hope this forum will still continue and flourish as it does. So I sort of took your question to another direction. I hope it's fine.
No, it's indeed a very interesting topic, but unfortunately we run out of time, because otherwise we would have had the opportunity to also elaborate a little bit more on this melting pot of different cultures that startups and innovations generate. I would now like to ask a very last question to my co-panelists, a very short question. So in your eyes, what is the core ingredient for innovation or for successful startups? Because we're here at a cooking show, we're talking about innovation, so one ingredient. Are you ready, David? Nicholas?
I'm on the spot. So for me, it would definitely be, I liked what we were referring to about Israel before, about kind of that, you know, passion and perseverance. I'd have to say it's passion for sure. It needs to have a large amount of passion.
First ingredient, passion.
I totally agree, and I would add education. If you're not prepared, you have to be an opportunist in the best sense of the word. You have to be ready when the chance is there, and when you have the idea, you need some basic knowledge and education to be able to achieve your dreams. And I also want to send out an invitation to Hemdat. So you have to come to Madrid at one point, because it's not fair that we're eating here.
I thought maybe I'll grab a glass of wine.
So there's a standing invitation for you to come to Madrid.
I look forward.
To continue that talk here. Or in Tel Aviv, for that sake.
Yeah, and likewise. Please feel invited.
Thank you so much.
So Hemdat, one last ingredient from you.
Yeah, don't be afraid to fail, because you only learn from failures. So failure is actually a good thing.
Dare and be courageous. So I would like to take the opportunity to thank you all, my co-panelists, to the chief David, to the audience, to the questions that you addressed. David, thank you very much. Nicholas, thank you very much. Hemdat, to you from Tel Aviv, despite the technical problems, a big thank you. We all enjoyed the talk. We will continue enjoying our meals, and we will now go on with Mena on the map. Enjoy.
Amen.